Chapter 1. The House She Would Not Leave. The first stranger to put his hand on Margaret Harper's kitchen table did not know he had touched the one place Evelyn still considered sacred. He was a tall man in a navy jacket with a tablet tucked under one arm and a tape measure clipped to his belt. His wedding ring clicked softly against the table's worn edge as he leaned forward to inspect the wood. It was only a practical gesture. Evelyn knew that. He was not being rude. He was not careless in any way that could be named. Still, her body went cold. "That table stays where it is," she said. The man looked up. "Of course, ma'am. I'm not moving anything." Clara's shoulders tightened near the sink. Evelyn Harper was 66 years old and had lived alone in the old house on Linden Street for nearly 11 years. Ever since her husband died and her daughter stopped asking her to move closer. The house had belonged to Evelyn's mother before it belonged to her. Margaret had cooked at that table, folded laundry there, written checks there, sat with one hand wrapped around a mug of tea during the last winter of her life. 30 years had passed since Margaret died upstairs in the front bedroom. 30 years since she had taken Evelyn's hand and left her with one unfinished sentence. Evelyn had built a life around that sentence. She had kept the house painted when she could afford paint, patched the roof when the leak reached the hallway, paid the taxes on time, and refused every gentle suggestion that it might be too much for one woman. Now, Claire had brought a realtor into the kitchen before 10 on a Tuesday morning. Not a realtor, Claire had corrected twice. A valuation specialist. Just someone to tell them what the property was worth. Evelyn did not care what title the man used. He was still a stranger walking through her mother's rooms and turning grief into square footage. The man cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harper, I'm just taking general notes. Original built-ins, hardwood under the linoleum, possible structural updates needed. Nothing final." "There is nothing final because nothing is being sold." Claire closed her eyes for half a second. "Mom." Evelyn did not look at her. She kept her eyes on the man's tablet. "You can write that down too." The man gave the small, careful smile of a person who had been trained not to enter family arguments. "I can step outside for a minute." "No," Claire said quickly. You're fine." "He's not fine," Evelyn said. "He is standing in my kitchen making a list of everything wrong with it. He's doing what I asked him to do. That doesn't make it better." Claire took one slow breath. She was 39 now, old enough to have lines near her mouth when she was tired, young enough that Evelyn still caught herself seeing the child who used to sit under that same table with a coloring book. Clara wore dark jeans, a beige cardigan, and the expression she used when she was trying very hard not to sound like she was parenting her own mother. "It's just information," Clara said. "Information for what?" "For options." "I didn't ask for options." "No," Clara said, "you didn't. That's part of the problem." The man's tablet dimmed in his hand. He looked toward the hallway, then down at his shoes. Evelyn hated that. She hated that Clara had brought a stranger into the room and made him a witness to the way they spoke to each other now. Their private trouble had always been private. Evelyn believed in that much, at least. Family arguments belonged behind doors, not in front of men with clipboards and polite shoes. She turned to him. "You can stop measuring." "Mrs. Harper, I really don't want to—" "You heard her," Claire said, but her voice had changed, softer. Dangerous in the way soft voices could be dangerous. "Maybe give us a few minutes." The man nodded with visible relief. "I'll check the exterior then." He moved carefully around the table, as if the chairs might object too, and disappeared through the back door. Cold air slipped in before the door shut. Evelyn stood very still until she heard his footsteps on the porch boards. Only then did she touch the table where his hand had been. Clara saw it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The kitchen looked smaller with the stranger gone. The yellowed curtains above the sink let in thin morning light. A brown water stain spread across one corner of the ceiling where the upstairs bathroom had leaked last spring. The linoleum near the stove had curled at the seam. One cabinet door no longer closed, unless Evelyn lifted it first and pushed with her hip. Claire's eyes moved over all of it with the tired grief of someone counting dangers. Evelyn lifted her chin. "Don't start." "I haven't said anything." "You don't have to." Clara put one hand on the counter. "Mom, you fell." "I slipped. You were on the bathroom floor for almost an hour." "I got up." "After an hour, I got up," Evelyn repeated. Claire's mouth tightened. "That isn't the victory you think it is." Evelyn turned toward the sink and moved the dish towel from one side of the counter to the other. There was nothing to clean. She did it anyway. "I've lived in this house longer than you have been alive," she said. "That doesn't mean the stairs are safe." "The stairs are fine. You hold the wall when you go down them. People hold walls. People also install railings that aren't loose." Evelyn laughed once, without humor. So now the railing is why you brought a man here to price my home? I brought him here because you won't talk to me unless I force the conversation. That is not a conversation, that is an ambush. It's an assessment. It's my house? Clara looked at her then fully. I know. No, I don't think you do. I know exactly whose house it is. I know because anytime I try to discuss your safety, you remind me. Evelyn felt the old heat rise beneath her ribs. Safety. That was the word Clara had chosen lately because it sounded kind. It sounded responsible. It made Evelyn sound unreasonable if she resisted. Safety meant grab bars, pill organizers, selling, downsizing, letting someone else decide what was too much for her. My mother left me this house, Evelyn said. Clara's face changed, but only slightly. I know Grandma left it to you. She didn't leave it to me so I could invite strangers to pick it apart. No one is picking it apart. He wrote down the ceiling, because it's stained. He wrote down the floor, because it's coming up. He put his hand on her table. The sentence came out sharper than Evelyn intended. It struck the room and stayed there. Clara looked at the table, then back at Evelyn. That's what this is about? Evelyn folded the dish towel once, then again. This is about respect. No, this is about Grandma. Evelyn's hand stopped. Clara's voice softened, but not enough to be gentle. Everything is about Grandma when it comes to this house. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you won't let anyone replace a cabinet hinge because she used to open it. I know you won't move that table 6 inches, even though the leg catches on the floor. I know I offered to fix the upstairs bathroom and you acted like I'd asked to tear down a church. Evelyn turned on her. Do not mock her. I'm not mocking her. You never understood what she asked of me, because you never tell me. The words landed too close to the truth. Evelyn looked away first. Outside, the man's footsteps crossed the side yard. The tape measure snapped back into its case with a small metallic bite. Clara lowered her voice. Mom, what did she ask? Evelyn stared at the back door. She could still hear Margaret's breathing sometimes, not often. Only in certain rooms, at certain hours, when the house settled in winter, or when the radiator knocked behind the wall. Her mother's hand had been thin and dry in hers. The room had smelled of medicine and old sheets. Margaret had tried to say more. Evelyn knew she had. But the words had come out broken, pulled from somewhere too deep. Don't let him, Evelyn swallowed. She asked me to keep it, she said. Clara waited. That's all you need to know. No, Clara said quietly, it isn't. Evelyn moved toward the hallway. This conversation is finished. It's finished when you say it is. That's always been the rule in this house. Evelyn stopped at the doorway. Clara's voice shook now, but she did not take it back. You think I'm trying to take something from you. I'm not. I'm trying to keep you alive long enough for us to have a relationship that isn't just me visiting you in rooms I'm not allowed to touch. Evelyn turned around. That is unfair. Is it? Yes. Then tell me where I'm wrong. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came. Claire stepped away from the counter. I am not asking you to throw her away. I'm not asking you to forget her. I'm asking you to look at the house as it is now. I see the house. No, you see what it was when she was here. That is not a crime? No, but I'm here too. The room went very still. Evelyn felt the first small break in her anger. She did not want it. Anger was easier. It gave her something to hold. Clara wiped quickly under one eye, almost angrily, as if the tear had embarrassed her. Grandma died 30 years ago, Mom. Evelyn flinched. Clara saw it and looked sorry for half a second, but she kept going. She died 30 years ago, and somehow I'm still the one losing my mother to her. The sentence did not sound loud. It did not need to. It moved through the kitchen more surely than shouting would have. Evelyn's hand found the back of one of the chairs. That is a cruel thing to say. I know. Then why say it? Because nothing else has worked. Evelyn looked at her daughter and saw, with sudden, unwelcome clarity, how tired Clara was. Not irritated, not controlling. Tired. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. One sleeve of her cardigan had slipped over her hand, and she kept gripping the cuff like she needed something small to hold. For a moment, Evelyn almost told her. Not everything. Not the whole story. Just enough to make Clara understand that the house was not a preference. It was not stubbornness. It was the last thing Margaret had put into Evelyn's hands before leaving the world. But the old defense closed first. You had no right to bring him here, Evelyn said. Clara nodded once, the motion small and hurt. Maybe I didn't. It should have felt like winning. It did not. The back door opened before either of them could speak again. The man stepped halfway inside, cheeks pink from the cold. I can come back another time, he said. Claire did not look at Evelyn. Yes, I think that would be best. He nodded, murmured something about emailing preliminary notes, and left through the back door again. This time, Clara followed him to the driveway. Evelyn stayed in the kitchen. Through the window above the sink, she watched Clara speak to him beside his car. Claire's posture had changed. Professional, apologetic, responsible. Evelyn could not hear the words, only see the shape of her daughter managing the discomfort Evelyn had refused to manage. The man drove away after a few minutes. Claire came back in with her purse already over her shoulder. "I'll call you later," she said. Evelyn wanted to say that there was no need. She wanted to say she was fine. She wanted to say the house had stood longer than Claire's worry and would continue standing after it. Instead, she said, "You shouldn't have done it this way." Claire looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't know what other way you would let me." That was worse than an accusation. Then she left. The house settled after the front door closed. It made its ordinary sounds, the refrigerator humming, a pipe ticking behind the wall, the faint rasp of wind at the old kitchen window. Evelyn stood beside the table until her legs reminded her she had been standing too long. She sat down in Margaret's chair. Not her chair, she corrected herself. Margaret's chair. Even after 30 years, she still thought of it that way. The tabletop bore the marks of ordinary use. A pale ring from a hot pot. A narrow scratch from the year Clara had tried to cut construction paper without asking for scissors. A darker patch, near the corner where Margaret's wrist used to rest when she wrote grocery lists. Evelyn ran her thumb over that patch. Clara did not understand. How could she? Evelyn had never told her the whole of it. She had given Clara pieces, enough to stop questions, but not enough to invite them. Grandma wanted me to keep the house. Grandma trusted me with it. Grandma knew what your grandfather was. Clean sentences, safe sentences. Not the bedroom upstairs. Not Margaret's fingers tightening around hers. Not the terror in her mother's eyes when she tried to speak. Not the way Evelyn had bent close, desperate, as if love itself might be hidden in the final syllable. Evelyn stood too quickly and had to grip the table until the room steadied. The anger returned, but thinner now, less useful. She would find the papers. There had been a folder, maybe two. The deed, the old tax records, Margaret's notes, the documents Evelyn had gathered after the funeral when Thomas tried to tell her things she had not wanted to hear. She had put them all away because there had been no need to keep reopening what was already settled. But Claire had forced the question into the room, so Evelyn would answer it properly. She took the stairs slowly, one hand on the wall despite herself. Halfway up, she stopped and looked down at the loose railing Clara had mentioned. The bracket had pulled away from the plaster again. Evelyn stared at it for a moment, irritated that her daughter had been right about even that small thing. At the top of the stairs, the hallway smelled faintly of dust and cedar. Margaret's bedroom door stood closed at the far end. Evelyn did not look at it for long. The attic stairs folded down from the ceiling outside the linen closet. Evelyn fetched the hook from behind the door and pulled. The steps came down with a groan that sounded too loud in the empty hallway. "Ridiculous," she muttered, though no one had said anything. She climbed carefully. The attic was low and dry, crowded with boxes labeled in her own handwriting. Christmas, Clara School, tax, linens. A cracked lampshade leaned against an old sewing machine. Dust shifted in the narrow beam of light from the bare bulb overhead. Evelyn found the metal file box behind a stack of folded quilts. It was heavier than she remembered. She dragged it toward the attic opening, then stopped, breathing harder than she wanted to admit. Her hip ached from the fall. Her right hand trembled slightly when she fitted the small key into the lock. Inside were folders, envelopes, brittle receipts, a copy of the deed, and old insurance papers. She moved through them with increasing impatience. Then she saw the envelope, cream-colored, soft at the edges. Her name written across the front in Margaret's hand. Evelyn sat back on her heels. For a moment, she did not touch it. The handwriting was thinner than she remembered, the letters slightly uneven, as if Margaret had written it when her strength was already leaving. Evelyn had seen that hand on birthday cards, grocery lists, notes taped to casserole dishes. But here, on this envelope, the letters seemed to be holding themselves together by effort alone. Evelyn slid one finger under the flap. Inside was a folded page, only a few lines. The first words were smudged, as if a drop of water had fallen before the ink dried. Evelyn tilted the paper toward the bulb. "My Evelyn, if I do not get the chance to explain, you must not mistake my fear for..." The last word disappeared into a blur. Evelyn stared at it. Below that, half a sentence began and stopped. The house was never meant to... Nothing more. The attic seemed to narrow around her. Downstairs, the kitchen table waited in the quiet, still bearing the place where the stranger's hand had rested. Outside, Clara's tire marks curved away from the curb. Evelyn read the lines again. "You must not mistake my fear for..." Her thumb pressed lightly against the smudged word, as if pressure could bring it back. Chapter 2, the last sentence. The paper smelled like the attic. Not dust exactly. Dust was sharper than that. This was older, drier. The smell of cardboard boxes left too long under a roof in summer and winter and summer again. Evelyn held the letter close to the bare bulb, but the light only made the smudge spread wider across the page. My Evelyn, if I do not get the chance to explain, you must not mistake my fear for... The word afterfor had bled into a pale gray blur. Below it, another sentence started and broke off. The house was never meant to... Evelyn sat back on her heels beside the open file box. For a moment, she heard the attic around her. The small scratch of a branch against the roof. The quiet shift of old wood. Her own breathing louder than it should have been. She had never seen this letter before. That was impossible. She had gone through everything after the funeral. She had signed papers, paid bills, argued with Thomas, filed the deed, changed the utilities, handled the insurance. She had become, in less than a week, the only person in the family willing to do what needed doing. And yet here was her mother's handwriting, thin and shaky, saying something Evelyn did not want it to say. Fear, not hatred. Evelyn pressed the page flat against her knee. The attic bulb hummed above her. The house below stayed quiet, as if it were waiting to see what she would remember. 30 years ago, the hallway outside Margaret Harper's bedroom had smelled of boiled towels, drugstore lotion, and the weak chicken broth Evelyn kept reheating even after her mother stopped wanting it. Evelyn had been 36 then, old enough to have a failing marriage of her own, and young enough to still become a child at the sound of her mother coughing. She had come back to Linden Street with 2 suitcases, a pharmacy bag, and the firm belief that she was there to help. She had told her husband she would stay a week, then 2, then as long as necessary. Margaret's bed had been moved closer to the window because she said she liked the light in the mornings. By afternoon, the light made her squint. Evelyn kept adjusting the curtains, never getting them right. "Leave them," Margaret would say. "You said it was too bright." "I said it was bright. I didn't say fix it." That was how her mother had been even then. Gentle, but not as soft as people thought. She could refuse without raising her voice. She could end a conversation by closing her eyes. Evelyn would smooth the blanket over her mother's legs and pretend not to see how little shape remained beneath it. Thomas came and went from the room like a man entering a church he no longer believed in. He stood near the foot of the bed, cleared his throat, asked if Margaret needed anything, and left before she could ask for the thing she actually needed. Evelyn hated him for that. She hated the way he folded the newspaper too loudly in the kitchen. Hated the way he answered the phone in a low voice and walked into the pantry. Hated the way he seemed embarrassed by illness, as if Margaret had chosen something inconvenient. One afternoon, Evelyn found him at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes spread in front of him. He had one hand on the back of his neck and the other on a calculator. "Medical bills?" she asked. Thomas gathered the envelopes too quickly. "Nothing you need to worry about. I'm the one calling the pharmacy. I'm the one driving her to appointments." "I said I've got it." "You always say that." He looked up then. His face had gone hard in that familiar way, the way that had made Evelyn stop asking questions as a teenager. "Don't start." "I didn't start anything." "No, you came home and decided you were in charge." Evelyn looked toward the ceiling, toward the room where Margaret was sleeping. "Someone has to be." The words landed. She saw it. Thomas's mouth closed, and for a second his pride had nowhere to go. Then he put the envelopes into a folder and stood. "Your mother doesn't need to hear us bickering." "That's convenient." He walked past her without answering. Later, when Evelyn checked the trash for an empty medicine bottle she thought she had thrown out by mistake, she found a torn corner of an envelope with the name Walter Briggs printed in blue at the top. Briggs Property Services. She had seen the name before, though not often. Walter Briggs had been one of those men who existed around families like weathered fences and old business cards. He knew deeds, tax liens, small loans, property transfers. He was not exactly a lawyer, not exactly a realtor, not exactly anyone's friend. Thomas had known him for years through the hardware store and the county office. When Evelyn asked about him, Thomas said, "He's helping with paperwork." "What paperwork?" "The kind you don't understand." That answer stayed under Evelyn's skin all day. Margaret noticed. Her mother noticed everything she was not supposed to have the strength to notice. That evening, Evelyn carried a tray upstairs with broth, crackers, and tea Margaret would barely sip. Margaret's eyes moved to Evelyn's face before Evelyn even set the tray down. "You're angry," Margaret said. "I'm tired." "That too." Evelyn adjusted the medicine bottles on the nightstand. "Dad is hiding things." Margaret's fingers moved against the blanket. Not much, just a small tightening. "Your father has always been proud." "That isn't an answer." "No." "Is there money trouble?" Margaret looked toward the window. Outside, the November trees stood bare along the street. There is always some kind of trouble when a man thinks silence will keep his dignity. It was the closest Margaret had come to criticism. Evelyn should have followed it. She should have sat down and asked her mother what she meant. Instead, she lifted the cup of tea and said, "You need a drink." Margaret smiled faintly. "There she is." "Who?" "My daughter, fixing what she can hold." The words annoyed Evelyn. They sounded too much like a blessing and too much like a warning. Downstairs, the front door opened. Both women heard it. Thomas's voice came first, low and strained. Another man answered, heavier, with the rough friendliness of someone who used familiarity as a tool. Margaret's hand moved again on the blanket. Evelyn looked toward the hall. "Is that him?" Margaret did not ask who. The second man laughed once. The laugh did not travel well up the stairs. It thinned as it rose, becoming something unpleasant by the time it reached the bedroom. "Stay here," Evelyn said. Margaret's eyes sharpened. "Evelyn, I'm only going to see." "No." The word was not loud, but it stopped her at the doorway. Evelyn turned back. Margaret was trying to push herself higher against the pillows. Her face had changed. The illness was still there, the grayness, the exhaustion. But something else had broken through it. Fear, yes. Not the fear of pain or dying, a practical fear. A fear with a name. "Mom?" Margaret swallowed. "Don't sign anything?" "I'm not signing anything. He'll make it sound temporary." Evelyn moved back to the bed. "Who?" Margaret shut her eyes as if even that one word had cost too much. Downstairs, a chair scraped across the kitchen floor. Then Thomas said, not loudly enough for the words to be clear, "She's sick, Walter." "Walter." Evelyn stood still. The reply came in pieces. "Then you ought to be thinking ahead." "Not now. You should have thought about that before the bank." Thomas cut him off. "Keep your voice down." Margaret reached for Evelyn's wrist. Her grip was weak but urgent. "Mom, what is he doing?" Margaret's mouth worked. No sound came at first. Evelyn bent closer, all irritation gone now, replaced by a tight, bright focus. She wanted facts, names, instructions, something she could do. "House," Margaret whispered. "What about the house?" Margaret breathed through the pain. "Yours." Evelyn looked toward the floor, toward the men below them. "Is Dad trying to sell it?" Margaret's fingers tightened. The question had come from a place already prepared to believe the worst of Thomas. That was the truth Evelyn would not admit for years. She had been angry before she had proof. She had been ready before the accusation arrived. Margaret tried to speak again, but a cough took her. Evelyn reached for the basin, held a cloth to her mother's mouth, wiped her chin with a tenderness so practiced it almost hid the panic. When it passed, Margaret was exhausted. "Rest," Evelyn said, though she was the one who needed the order. "We'll talk in the morning." Margaret looked at her then with such frustration that Evelyn almost stepped back. "There may not be—" "Don't say that." Margaret let the unfinished sentence remain between them. That night, Evelyn slept in the chair beside the bed and woke every time the house made a sound. Once, near midnight, she opened her eyes to find Thomas standing in the doorway. He looked older than he had that afternoon. "How is she?" he asked. "You can come in and see." He did not move. Evelyn waited. "There are things," he said. "What things?" His eyes shifted to Margaret, asleep or pretending to be. "Not here." "Of course not." His face hardened. "You think you know everything." "No," Evelyn said. "I think nobody tells me anything until it's too late." Thomas looked as if he might answer. Then Margaret stirred and his mouth closed. He stepped back from the doorway. "Get some sleep," he said. It was such a useless thing to say that Evelyn almost laughed. The next day was worse. Margaret drifted in and out. The hospice nurse came in the morning and spoke gently in the hall, not quietly enough. Evelyn heard phrases she pretended not to understand. Changes in breathing. Keep her comfortable. Call if you need us tonight. Thomas spent most of the afternoon outside or in the basement. Once Evelyn heard him on the phone saying, "No, not today. I told you not today." Margaret refused broth. She took water from a spoon. Around dusk, she asked Evelyn to open the drawer of the bedside table. "There's nothing in there but tissues," Evelyn said. "Open it." Inside were tissues, a rosary Margaret had kept though she had not been to Mass in years, a pencil worn almost to nothing, and a small folded paper. When Evelyn reached for it, Margaret shook her head. "Later," she breathed. "Later when?" Margaret did not answer. Downstairs, the front door opened again. This time Evelyn knew the second set of steps before the voices began. Walter Briggs did not knock like a guest. He came in as if the house had already agreed to something. Evelyn stepped into the hall. The men were on the front porch, just beyond the screen door, their shapes cut by the porch light. She could not hear every word, but enough came through. "Transfer can be clean if you stop fighting me on it," Walter said. Thomas's voice was tight. "Well, it isn't mine to transfer. You're her husband. Her name is on it." And after she's gone, lower your voice. After she's gone, you'll have your daughter in here with opinions and no understanding of what's owed. Evelyn gripped the banister. Thomas said something she missed. Walter answered, "Debt doesn't care who's grieving." From the bedroom, Margaret made a sound. Evelyn turned immediately. Her mother was trying to sit up again. No, Mom, don't. Evelyn hurried to her. Margaret's eyes were open and fixed on the doorway. She had heard enough. Maybe not the words, but the danger under them. Her breath came in short pulls. "Evelyn," she said, "I'm here. Listen." "I am listening." Margaret shook her head, angry now at the weakness of her own body. Her hands searched the blanket until Evelyn gave her fingers. "Don't let him—" Margaret stopped. Her throat worked. Evelyn leaned so close she could see the tiny red lines in her mother's eyes. "Don't let who?" Margaret's grip tightened with the last clean strength she had. "Don't let him take the house." The sentence entered Evelyn whole. Not as a warning to examine later, not as a fragment in need of context, as a command. Downstairs, Thomas's voice rose once, then fell. Walter's footsteps crossed the porch. Evelyn looked toward the doorway, then back at her mother. "Dad?" she whispered. Margaret's eyes shifted. Something in them changed. Not agreement, not denial. Panic, maybe. Or protest. Her lips parted. No sound came. "Mom," Evelyn said, "do you mean Dad?" Margaret tried to inhale and could not find enough air. Evelyn reached for the call button, knocked over the water glass, and shouted for Thomas. By the time he reached the room, Margaret's hand had gone loose in Evelyn's. The hospice nurse said later that Evelyn could not have done anything differently. People said things like that after death, as if usefulness were the point. Thomas stood at the foot of the bed with both hands hanging at his sides. Walter was gone. The house was suddenly too quiet, every room listening. Evelyn did not cry until the nurse covered Margaret's face. Then she cried once, sharply, like something breaking under pressure. At the funeral, people told Evelyn her mother had been a good woman. They said she had kept a beautiful home. They said Thomas would need her now. Evelyn accepted casseroles, shook hands, wrote names on masking tape stuck to dishes. Thomas tried to speak to her in the kitchen 2 days later. The table was covered with sympathy cards and foil-wrapped food no one wanted. "Evelyn," he said, "there are things about the house." She looked up from a stack of envelopes. "I know." "No, you don't." "I know enough." His face changed. "What did she say to you?" Evelyn held his gaze. For the first time in her life, she did not feel smaller than him. "She told me not to let you take it." Thomas went very still. "That isn't—" "Don't." "You don't understand." I said don't. His jaw worked. Pride came back first. It always did. "You're making a mistake." "No," Evelyn said, and the certainty felt like something she could stand on. "You made it before I got here." He looked toward the table, toward the cards, toward the closed bedroom door upstairs. For one brief second, she saw not anger but shame. Then he picked up his coat. Walter Briggs never came back to the house. Not openly, not while Evelyn was there. A letter arrived once with his business name in the corner, and Evelyn returned it unopened. She changed locks, transferred accounts, paid what needed paying, and learned the language of property tax, insurance, repairs, and refusal. When Thomas called, she let the phone ring. When he came by, she met him on the porch. When he said, "Your mother didn't want this," Evelyn closed the door before he could finish. By spring, everyone in town understood that the Harper house belonged to Evelyn now, not just by paper, but by vigilance. She kept the lawn cut. She painted the porch rail. She sat at Margaret's kitchen table with a notebook and bills and taught herself not to need anyone's explanation. Years hardened around that first decision, then decades. In the attic at 66, Evelyn blinked and found herself still holding the unfinished letter. Her knees hurt. The bulb above her flickered once and steadied. The paper in her hand trembled slightly, though she told herself it was only from the awkward way she was sitting. She read the first line again. "If I do not get the chance to explain, you must not mistake my fear for—" Fear for what? Fear of whom? The old answer rose automatically. Thomas. It had always been Thomas, but the word on the page refused to settle around him. Evelyn turned the paper over, searching for more. There was nothing on the back. She checked the envelope again, sliding 2 fingers inside to be sure no smaller note had stuck in the seam. Empty. Downstairs, the house gave a soft wooden creak, the kind it made when the evening temperature changed. For 30 years, she had trusted those sounds more than people. She lowered the letter onto the open file box and saw beneath it the edge of another folder. Briggs W. She did not touch it yet. Instead, she kept looking at her mother's unfinished sentence, the smudged word, the place where explanation had failed. Evelyn must not mistake my fear for hatred. Her mouth went dry. In the bedroom 30 years ago, she had asked one question. Dad? And because her mother had died before answering, Evelyn had treated the silence as yes. Chapter 3, The Wrong Man. The name appeared 3 times before Evelyn allowed herself to notice it. Walter Briggs. First on a faded invoice folded into the deed folder. Then on the corner of a yellowed note clipped to an old county tax notice. Then again on the back of a carbon copy, written in Thomas's square, impatient hand beside a number Evelyn did not recognize. She sat on the attic floor with the file box open between her knees. The unfinished letter from Margaret lying across a stack of insurance papers. The bare bulb above her gave off a weak heat. Dust clung to her sleeves. Her right hip ached from the awkward angle, but she ignored it. Walter Briggs had been there. Not just once, not as some passing name from her father's world. There were dates, amounts, phrases half covered by paper clips and age. Consultation, transfer review, outstanding balance. Evelyn slid one invoice free and held it closer. Briggs Property Services, 118 North Ash Street. Payment due upon completion. Completion of what? The question irritated her. She had not come up here to create new questions. She had come up here to settle one. Her mother had told her not to let him take the house. Evelyn had known who him meant. She had known it for 30 years, with the clean force of grief and duty. Thomas had wanted to explain. Thomas had wanted to soften it after Margaret died. But men like Thomas always wanted to explain after the damage was done. Still, Margaret's letter sat beside her knee. You must not mistake my fear for... Evelyn put the invoice underneath another folder. Then she pulled it out again. The attic ladder creaked below her. Mom? Claire's voice came from the hallway, sharp, with the kind of worry that already sounded angry. Evelyn froze. Mom, are you up there? I'm fine, Evelyn called. The ladder shifted. Claire's head appeared through the opening a second later, then her shoulders. She looked up into the attic and stopped. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Evelyn knew what Clara saw. Papers spread around her. An open file box, a 66-year-old woman sitting on unfinished boards 2 days after a fall, pretending the narrow attic stairs were nothing. Clara climbed the last steps too quickly. Are you kidding me? Lower your voice. You're in the attic. I'm aware. You fell in the bathroom this week. And now I'm sitting. Very dangerous. Claire's eyes moved over the papers. What are you doing? Looking for documents. What documents? The kind people need when strangers come to price their house without permission. Clara pressed her lips together, then looked toward the attic opening. You could have called me. I didn't need you. That's not the point. It always seems to be the point. Clara crouched, but the low ceiling made the movement awkward. She reached toward a loose pile near Evelyn's left knee. Evelyn moved faster than she should have and slid the papers under her hand. Clara noticed. Her expression changed from anger to something more hurtful, recognition. What are you hiding? Nothing. Then let me see. They're old papers. Mom. Evelyn gathered the invoice, the tax notice, and Margaret's unfinished letter into one folder and closed it. You came here to check whether I'd fallen down the attic stairs. You've checked. Clara stared at the folder. Is this about Grandma? Evelyn did not answer. Clara sat back on her heels. You can't keep doing this. Doing what? Turning everything into proof that you're the only one who loved her correctly. The sentence was too close. Evelyn felt it strike, then refused to show it. You don't know what those papers are. No, because you won't let me know. There are things in a family that don't need to be handled by committee. I'm not a committee, I'm your daughter. Evelyn looked down at the folder in her lap. The tab had no label. She had always meant to label it. After the funeral, after the utilities, after the bank, after Thomas stopped calling so often. There had always been something more urgent. Claire's voice softened, which made Evelyn more wary. Please come down. I will. Now. In a minute. No, now. Evelyn looked at her. Do not speak to me like I'm a child. Then stop making me afraid like one. The attic became too small for both of them. Clara swallowed and then glanced toward the ladder. I saw your car keys downstairs. I thought maybe you'd gone somewhere. Then I heard you moving around up here. Do you know what that felt like? I said I'm fine. You always say you're fine after you've done something that proves you're not. Evelyn closed the file box with a hard metallic snap. Clara flinched, then looked away. That small flinch should not have mattered. It did. Evelyn turned the lock on the file box. I need to speak with Ruth Donnelly. Clara blinked. Mrs. Donnelly from next door? She lived next door when my mother was sick. She moved to assisted living 5 years ago. I know where she is. Why do you need to talk to her? Evelyn picked up the file box handle. It was heavier than she remembered. Because she may know something about Walter Briggs. Clara stared at her. Who is Walter Briggs? The name sounded different in Clara's mouth. Less old, less settled. No one you need to worry about. Mom. Evelyn shifted toward the attic opening. Her hip protested sharply enough that she had to stop. Clara saw that too. You're hurt. I'm stiff. You're hurt and you're climbing around up here, looking for some man from 30 years ago. He was involved with the house. The house, Clara repeated. Evelyn hated the way she said it, not mocking, worse, tired. Clara stood as much as the ceiling allowed. You're going to fall through this opening one day trying to protect a stack of papers. I'm trying to understand something. No, you're trying to prove you were right. Evelyn looked up at her. Clara's face had gone pale with the effort of not backing down. And maybe you were. Maybe Grandpa was awful. Maybe this Walter person was awful, I don't know. But I know you're sitting in an attic with a bad hip and a locked box because you'd rather fight ghosts than let me help you down the stairs. The words left a thin, bright sting. Evelyn wanted to tell her to leave. Instead, she held out the file box. Clara hesitated. Take it, Evelyn said. Clara took the box. The weight surprised her. Evelyn did not let go immediately. Don't open it. Clara looked at her hand on the handle. I wasn't going to. You were thinking about it. I'm thinking about a lot of things. Evelyn released the box. Getting down the ladder took longer with Clara watching. That alone made Evelyn resent every careful movement. At the bottom, Clara set the box on the hallway floor and offered a hand. Evelyn ignored it and used the wall. Neither of them spoke until they reached the kitchen. The kitchen still bore the evidence of the previous day's argument. One chair had not been pushed in. The realtor's business card lay on the counter where Clara must have left it. Evelyn turned it face down. Clara noticed that too. I can drive you to Mrs. Donnelly, she said. No, of course. And I can drive myself. You shouldn't. I have a license. You also have a bruise the size of a grapefruit. Evelyn set the file box on the table. Do not exaggerate. I saw it. You were not invited to inspect me. Clara's eyes closed briefly. When she opened them, the anger was still there, but she had set it aside with visible effort. Fine, she said, then I'll follow you. That is ridiculous. So is this whole conversation? Evelyn reached for her purse. Clara did not stop her. That somehow felt worse than being stopped. Ruth Donnelly lived in a brick assisted living building on the edge of town. The kind with clean windows, artificial wreaths, and a front desk that smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant. Evelyn had not visited in nearly a year. She sent Christmas cards. She told herself, cards counted. Ruth was in the common room near the windows, knitting something pale blue and uneven. She had once been tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of neighbor who could carry 2 grocery bags in each hand and still open the door with her hip. Now she seemed folded into the chair, her silver hair pinned loosely at the back of her head, but her eyes were still sharp. Well, Ruth said when Evelyn approached, you look like your mother when you're about to tell someone no. Evelyn stopped beside the chair. Claire stood a few steps behind her, holding the file box in both hands like evidence she had not been allowed to read. Hello, Ruth? Ruth looked past Evelyn. And that must be Clara. Last time I saw you, you were losing a front tooth. Claire smiled politely. It came back in. Good. Teeth should. Ruth set her knitting in her lap. Sit down before you hover me into the grave. Evelyn sat. Clara remained standing until Ruth pointed at the other chair. You too. Clara obeyed. For a few seconds, the 3 women sat with the low noise of the common room around them. A television murmuring near the fireplace. A cart rattling down the hall. Someone laughing too loudly at a card table. Evelyn did not know how to begin. Ruth did not help her. At last, Evelyn opened her purse and took out the invoice with Walter's name. She unfolded it carefully. Do you remember Walter Briggs? Ruth's hands stilled on the knitting. That was answer enough. Evelyn felt Clara look at her. Ruth took the paper, squinted at it, then gave it back without reading further. I remember Walter. He came to the house when my mother was sick. That he did. How often? Ruth looked toward the window. Outside, a maintenance man was blowing leaves from the walkway, even though there were hardly any leaves left. More often than a decent man should have. Clara shifted in her chair. Evelyn kept her voice steady. What was he doing there? Ruth's mouth tightened, pushing. For what? For what men like Walter always push for when people are tired and afraid. Sign here. Decide now. Don't worry the details, that sort of thing. Evelyn's fingers closed around the edge of her purse. Was my father working with him? Ruth gave her a careful look. Your father owed money. I knew that much. Everybody on the block knew enough to know we weren't supposed to know. Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. Ruth continued, Thomas was proud. Proud men will stand in a burning room and tell you it's only warm. Clara looked down. Evelyn said, my mother was afraid of him. Thomas? Evelyn did not answer quickly enough. Ruth leaned back. Your mother was disappointed in Thomas. Angry with him too, though she didn't like to wear anger where people could see it. But fear? She shook her head once. Not the way you mean. Evelyn's throat tightened. You don't know what I mean. I knew Margaret. You weren't in the room. No, Ruth said. But I was on the porch the day Walter Briggs came out smiling, and your mother watched him from the upstairs window like she'd seen a fox near the henhouse. The common room sounds seemed to pull away. Clara's voice came carefully. "Well, Mrs. Donnelly, did Grandma ever tell you what he wanted?" Ruth looked at Clara, then back at Evelyn, asking silent permission. Evelyn gave none. Ruth answered anyway. He wanted the house handled before Margaret died. Said it would save trouble. Said there were obligations. Said Thomas could make it easier if everybody was reasonable. She lifted one hand. I didn't hear all of it. People didn't invite neighbors into business then. But your mother called me after he left. Asked if I still had my nephew's number. The one who worked at the courthouse. Evelyn gripped the arms of her chair. She never told me that. She wasn't telling you a lot by then, Ruth said, not unkindly. The words landed plain and hard. Evelyn looked at the invoice again. Walter Briggs. Payment due upon completion. Ruth picked up her knitting but did not resume. Margaret wanted time. Walter wanted signatures. Thomas wanted the whole thing to go away before anybody knew how bad it had gotten. Evelyn heard her own voice as if from across the room. She told me not to let him take the house. Ruth's eyes lifted. Clara went still. Evelyn had not meant to say that much in front of Clara. The sentence had been hers for so long that speaking it aloud felt like opening a locked drawer in public. Ruth watched her carefully. When? The night she died. Ruth's face softened. Evelyn hated the softness. I asked if she meant my father. And did she say yes? The question was quiet. Evelyn looked away. Ruth did not press. She did not need to. Across the room, someone changed the television channel. A burst of canned laughter rose and vanished. Claire's hand moved slowly to the file box on the floor beside her chair, then stopped before touching it. Ruth lowered her voice. Evelyn, I can't tell you what was in your mother's last breath, but I can tell you this. That week, the man Margaret was scared to see coming up the walk was not Thomas. Evelyn stared at the invoice until the blueprint blurred. Thomas let him in, she said. Yes. He hid things. Yes. He should have told me. Yes. Ruth did not soften any of those answers. That was almost a mercy. But Walter was the one pushing the papers, Ruth said, and Margaret knew it. Evelyn folded the invoice along an old crease. The room had not changed. The television still murmured. The maintenance man still moved leaves that did not need moving. Clara still sat beside her, too quiet now. But Evelyn could feel something shift under the story she had carried for 30 years. Not collapse, not yet. A hairline crack. She held herself very still, as if movement might widen it. Ruth reached into the canvas bag beside her chair and pulled out a tissue, though she did not use it. There was something else. Evelyn looked up. Your mother asked me once to witness a note. What note? I don't know that she ever finished it. She was tired. Her hands shook. But she said if things got confused after, she wanted you to know the house was yours to come back to. Ruth paused. Not yours to guard like a prison. She didn't say it that way, but that was the shape of it. Evelyn's first instinct was refusal. It rose quickly, a clean no at the back of her tongue. But Clara was sitting there. Clara who had found her in the attic. Clara who had carried the locked box without opening it. Clara who now looked not victorious, not relieved, but frightened by how much this might hurt her mother. Where is it? Evelyn asked. Ruth shook her head. I don't have it. Then why mention it? Because you may. I went through everything. Ruth's eyes were gentle and inconvenient. Did you? Evelyn stood too quickly. Pain pulled through her hip, but she kept her face still. Clara stood with her. Mom, I'm fine. Ruth made a small sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so tired. Every Harper says that right before they make trouble. Evelyn put the invoice into her purse. Clara picked up the file box. At the door to the common room, Evelyn turned back. Ruth. The older woman looked up. Did my mother hate him? Walter? My father. Ruth's answer took a long time. No, she said finally, but she was done protecting his pride. Evelyn nodded once. Outside, Clara followed her across the walkway in silence. The air had cooled, and a thin band of late sun lay across the parking lot. Evelyn reached for her car keys, then stopped when Clara stepped in front of her. I'm driving, Clara said. No, yes, Clara. You can be mad at me in the passenger seat. Evelyn almost argued. The argument was ready. It had lived in her for decades and knew its way out. But her hand was shaking around the keys. Clara saw. Evelyn knew she saw. Slowly, Evelyn placed the keys in her daughter's palm. Clara closed her fingers around them without comment. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. Clara kept both hands on the wheel. Evelyn watched the town pass in pieces. The pharmacy, the church sign, the laundromat with half its letters burned out, the hardware store Thomas used to visit on Saturday mornings. Nothing looked different enough. At the house, Clara parked at the curb instead of the driveway. Evelyn opened her door. "Mom," Claire said. Evelyn waited. Claire looked straight ahead through the windshield. "I don't want to take anything from you." The sentence was so plain that Evelyn had no defense ready for it. "I know," she said. It was not enough. She knew that too. Inside, Evelyn carried the file box to the kitchen table. She unlocked it while Clara stood near the doorway, not entering farther than she had been invited. For once, Evelyn noticed that. She took out the folders one by one. Deed, insurance, tax, utilities, medical. Then, the unlabeled folder from the attic. The one with Walter's invoice and Margaret's unfinished letter. At the bottom of the box, beneath a stack of old condolence cards, was a narrow bundle tied with faded blue thread. Evelyn did not remember putting it there. Across the top envelope, in Margaret's shaking hand, were 2 words. "For Evelyn." Claire stepped closer, then stopped herself. Evelyn looked at the bundle, then at her daughter. Her hand moved over the thread but did not pull it loose. Not yet. Chapter 4. What the House Really Held. Clara reached for the blue thread before Evelyn had decided whether she was allowed to. "Don't." Evelyn's hand came down over Clara's wrist. Not hard enough to hurt her, hard enough to stop her. The bundle stayed on the kitchen table between them, tied neatly with faded thread, Margaret's thin handwriting across the top envelope. "For Evelyn." Claire looked at her wrist, then at Evelyn. "I wasn't going to take it." "I didn't say you were. You grabbed me." Evelyn pulled her hand back. The movement left a small space between them, but not enough of one. The kitchen still felt crowded, though there were only the 2 of them, and the old file box open on the chair. They had brought the box down from the attic less than an hour ago. Claire had carried it because Evelyn's hip was bothering her, though neither of them had said that aloud. The metal corners had left faint dust marks on Claire's cardigan. Evelyn had noticed and said nothing. Now the bundle sat where dinner plates used to sit when Claire was young, where Margaret had rolled pie dough, where Evelyn had paid taxes, signed checks, and built her life around one unfinished sentence. Clara lowered her hand. "Okay." The word was small, but there was a long history inside it. Evelyn untied the thread herself. The knot had tightened with age, her thumbnail caught in the fibers. Clara did not offer to help. She stood near the doorway, still wearing her purse on one shoulder, as if she had only stopped by and might be asked to leave at any moment. That bothered Evelyn. It bothered her more because she knew she had taught Clara to stand that way. The first envelope held a page torn from an old notebook. Margaret's handwriting slanted downward, the letters thinner near the end of each line. Evelyn read it once. Then again, if the papers are not finished, Evelyn must know this house is to be hers. Not because she owes me anything. Because a woman should have one place where no one can send her away. Evelyn placed the page flat on the table. Clara did not move closer. She only looked at Evelyn's face. "What does it say?" Evelyn did not answer immediately. The sentence had entered her in the wrong place. "Not because she owes me anything." That was not the language of a command. It was not the language of a burden. She slid the page across the table. Clara came back slowly, as if Evelyn might change her mind halfway. She read without touching the paper at first, leaning over it with both hands braced on the table. Her face softened. "She wanted you to have somewhere," Clara said. Evelyn looked down at the paper. "She wanted me to keep the house." Clara did not argue. That made it worse. The next envelope held a recipe card, browned at the corner. Margaret's meatloaf. The one Clara used to hate. A faded smear of tomato sauce marked the front. On the back, in pencil, Margaret had written a few lines Evelyn had never seen. "She thinks I do not know she is unhappy. I know. She fixes my pillows and thinks that hides it. If the house can give her somewhere to stand when the rest of her life is uncertain, then let it do that much good." Evelyn sat very still. At 36, she had believed she had hidden everything. The suitcases in the upstairs room, the missed calls from Paul, the way she flinched when anyone asked when she was going home. Margaret had been dying. Evelyn had assumed her own life had become invisible beside that. Apparently not. Clara's voice came carefully. "Mom?" Evelyn folded the card along the old crease and kept it in her hand. "She knew more than I thought," she said. "About Walter?" "No." Clara waited. Evelyn did not explain. The third page mentioned Walter by name. "Walter came again today. Thomas says not to worry, Evelyn. That is how men make trouble sound like kindness." Evelyn read the line once, then passed it to Clara. Clara took it with both hands. "Walter," she said. "Yes, so Ruth was right. Ruth remembers what she remembers." "Mom." Evelyn hated the gentleness in Clara's voice. It felt too close to pity. "What? You still want all of this to point one way?" Evelyn lifted her eyes. Clara looked tired, but she did not look away. Toward Grandpa, toward Walter, toward anyone but the possibility that Grandma wanted something more complicated. Evelyn pushed the next envelope aside. "That is not what I'm doing." Then what are you doing? I'm trying to understand what happened. No, Clara said. You're trying to find the version that lets the last 30 years stay right. The sentence landed hard enough that Evelyn almost stood. Instead, she pressed both hands flat on the table. You don't get to judge 30 years from one afternoon. I'm not judging it. You just did. I'm trying to understand why there was never room for anything else. The kitchen changed around that sentence. Not in appearance, the table was still marked and worn. The envelopes were still spread between them. The sink still held one mug from the morning. But something had moved out from behind the house and stood in the open. Evelyn said, "Anything else?" Claire looked toward the hall, toward the stairway, toward the room she had moved through as a child, careful without knowing she was being careful. "Me," she said. Evelyn felt the word before she understood it. Claire gave a short, embarrassed laugh and looked down. "I don't hate this house. I never said you hated it. You act like I do. I act like you want to sell it. I wanted you safe." The word could have become an argument. It had before. Evelyn could feel the old path opening. Safe from what? Safe, according to whom? Safe at what cost? But Claire did not let it become that. "I wanted you to stop treating the house like it was more alive than I was," she said. Evelyn's hands tightened on the edge of the table. Claire kept going, not loudly, not cleanly. "When I was little, I thought Grandma's room was closed because she died there. Then I got older, and it felt like the whole house had rooms like that. Drawers I shouldn't open, chairs I shouldn't move, cabinets I was supposed to remember exactly, even the table." Evelyn looked at the table. Clara touched the old scratch near the corner with one finger. "I made this, didn't I? You were 7. I remember you being upset. You used scissors on wood. I was making you a birthday card." Evelyn remembered the scissors. She remembered the mark. She did not remember the card. That was worse. Clara pulled her hand back. "I don't think you meant to make me feel like a visitor." Evelyn wanted to say she had not. The words were ready, but Clara's purse was still on her shoulder. Her daughter had carried a locked file box into the kitchen and still stood as if she might be sent away. "I didn't know you felt that way," Evelyn said. Clara's mouth tightened, but she only nodded. Evelyn opened the next folded page because if she did not move, she might have to answer more than she could answer. This page had been written in pencil first, then traced over in pen as though Margaret had tried to make weak words last longer. "My daughter, if Walter or any man says the house must be handled quickly, do not believe him." Below that, one line had been written slowly, the words pressed darker into the paper. "Thomas has failed me in ways I'm too tired to repair, but he is not the one I fear will take this from you." The kitchen seemed to lose its small, ordinary noises. Evelyn read the line again. "Thomas has failed me, but he is not the one. Not innocent, not forgiven, not harmless, but not the one." Clara saw the change in Evelyn's face. "What is it?" Evelyn pushed the page toward her. Clara read it. Her hand went briefly to her mouth, then lowered again. She did not look relieved. She looked as if the page had taken something from her too. "Oh, Mom." Evelyn looked away. She could not bear the softness. Claire set the page down between them. "She wrote it." Yes, the answer came out too small. There were more lines beneath, crowded closer together. "I want Evelyn to have this house. Not to prove she loved me, not to prove anyone wrong. I want her to have a place to come back to when life leaves her standing alone." Evelyn read on, "But if the house ever asks for her whole life in return, then it has taken too much." Her hand let go of the paper. For a moment, she could not make herself touch it again. The words were not loud. They did not accuse. That was what made them unbearable. Margaret had not written with anger. She had written with worry, with that same quiet attention that had noticed Evelyn's failing marriage beneath pillow fixing and broth making. If the house ever asks for her whole life in return. Evelyn looked toward the hallway. The walls needed paint. The stair railing needed repair. The upstairs bathroom still had a loose tile near the tub. She knew every weakness of the house because she had treated each one like a test. Had she kept it, or had it kept her? Clara read the final lines after her and did not speak. Outside, a car passed slowly along Linden Street. The sound faded before either of them moved. At last, Clara said, "She didn't want you trapped here." Evelyn's first instinct was to reject the word. Trapped. Too dramatic, too young, too easy. But the word did not float above the room. It stood beside the locked attic box, the closed bedroom door, the table that could not be moved, the daughter who asked permission to sit in a kitchen where she had once lost baby teeth. Evelyn reached for the page, then stopped. "I thought I was doing what she asked," she said. "I know. You keep saying that, because I do know." Clara's eyes shone now, but she did not cry. "That doesn't mean it didn't hurt." Evelyn looked at her. Clara swallowed. "I don't want to compete with Grandma. I never did. I just wanted to feel like There was a place for me here that wasn't temporary. Evelyn had no defense for that, not one that did not shame her. She stood abruptly and the chair scraped the floor. Clara stood too. Mom, I need to see her room. The word surprised Evelyn as much as Clara. Margaret's room was upstairs at the front of the house. Evelyn kept it clean, dusted, unchanged. She had told herself unchanged meant respected. But as she climbed the stairs with Clara 2 steps behind her, she felt the house differently. Not accusing, not alive. Only full of decisions she had mistaken for devotion. At the top of the stairs, Evelyn stopped before the closed door. The brass knob was cool in her palm. She had opened this door many times alone. To dust. To change sheets no one slept in. To check for leaks. To prove in small ways that she had not abandoned anything. She had never opened it like this, with Clara behind her, waiting. Evelyn turned the knob. The room smelled faintly closed, though not dirty. The curtains were half drawn. The bedspread lay smooth and untouched. A wooden sewing box sat on the dresser beside an old hairbrush, a bottle of hand lotion, and a framed photograph of Margaret standing in the backyard with a sun hat tilted crookedly on her head. Clara stopped at the threshold. Evelyn noticed the pause. How quick it was, how practiced. "You can come in," Evelyn said. Clara looked at her. Evelyn stepped aside. Her daughter entered slowly, as if the floorboards might still report her. The sight did something to Evelyn, not all at once, just enough. Clara stood near the dresser and looked at the sewing box. Her hand lifted, then dropped back to her side. Evelyn knew that movement. She had taught that too. "Open it," Evelyn said. Clara's hand hovered over the lid. "Are you sure?" "No." The honest answer moved through Evelyn and left no sound. "Yes." Clara opened the box. Inside were spools of thread, a paper packet of needles, a folded measuring tape, 2 buttons in a small envelope, and a dented thimble. Clara picked up the thimble carefully, holding it between thumb and forefinger. "I remember this," she said. Evelyn looked at her. "You do?" "Grandma let me wear it once. I put it on the wrong finger." Evelyn had no memory of that. The loss of such a small thing hurt more than it should have. Clara smiled faintly at the thimble. "She told me a thimble was armor for people who fixed things." That sounded like Margaret. So much like Margaret that Evelyn had to sit on the edge of the bed. There were parts of her mother Clara had carried too. Evelyn had spent years guarding rooms and objects, and still Clara had kept this small sentence, this small memory, untouched by Evelyn's rules. Clara put the thimble back in the sewing box. "She wasn't only yours," Clara said. The line was soft, it still cut. Evelyn rested one hand on the bedspread. The fabric was clean, tucked tight, unused, too unused. "No," she said. Clara looked at her. Evelyn's voice came quieter. "No, she wasn't." Downstairs, the phone began to ring. Neither of them moved. It rang 4 times and stopped. Evelyn looked toward the hallway. In her mind, the old names arranged themselves again. Walter, Thomas, Margaret. But they did not sit where they had sat that morning. Walter had pushed. Thomas had hidden. Margaret had tried to warn. And Evelyn had chosen what she could bear to hear. She stood slowly. "I need to talk to him," she said. Clara did not ask who. "Grandpa, if he'll see me." Clara nodded. "I can drive." The refusal came almost automatically. Then Evelyn looked at the sewing box, open on the dresser, and at Clara standing beside it with both hands empty, waiting to be told how much of the room she was allowed to occupy. The refusal died before it reached her mouth. "Yes," Evelyn said. Clara's face changed just slightly. "You can drive?" Evelyn picked up the sewing box. It was lighter than it looked. She carried it out of Margaret's room and down the stairs, Clara following close behind. In the kitchen, Margaret's pages still lay open on the table. The blue thread rested beside them, no longer holding anything together. Evelyn set the sewing box next to the letters. Then she took the final page, the one that said, "The house could take too much," and placed it on top of the folder marked Briggs W. Her hand stayed there for a moment. Clara waited across from her. Evelyn reached for the phone. Chapter 5, The Visit. Walter Briggs looked smaller than the man Evelyn had carried in her mind. That was the first insult. She had expected something harder. A thick voice, a sharp suit, a face that still knew how to take up space. Instead, he sat in a vinyl chair beside the window of a small room at Briar Glen Assisted Living, wearing a gray cardigan with one sleeve stretched at the cuff. His hair had thinned to white wisps. His skin hung loose at the jaw. A walker stood beside his chair with 2 tennis balls on the front legs. On the windowsill sat a plastic cup of water, a television remote, and a bowl of peppermints no one had opened. Evelyn stood in the doorway and felt, absurdly, that the room had cheated her. Clara waited in the hall. She had driven Evelyn there, parked under the awning, walked her to the desk, and said nothing when the receptionist asked whether they were family. Evelyn had answered no before Clara could. The girl at the desk had smiled anyway and told them Mr. Briggs was awake. Awake, as if that were the only qualification left. Walter turned his head slowly when she entered. For a moment there was no recognition. His eyes moved over her face with the vague courtesy of old age. Then something sharpened, not much, but enough. "Well," he said, "well, Harper." Evelyn closed the door behind her. The room smelled faintly of shaving cream and old carpet. A baseball game played on the muted television. Walter's lunch tray sat untouched on a rolling table. Soup with a skin forming on top, 2 crackers, canned peaches. "You know who I am?" Evelyn asked. "Margaret's girl." Not Thomas's daughter, not Evelyn. Margaret's girl. She hated that the phrase found a soft place before she could stop it. "My name is Evelyn." "I know names better than faces now," Walter said. "Faces keep changing on me. Mine changed 30 years ago." He looked at her for a second. Then his eyes slid away to the television. "That's so?" Evelyn stepped farther into the room. She had rehearsed this in the car without meaning to. Short questions. No accusations first. Let him speak. Let him make the mistake of telling the truth. But now, standing before this diminished man, every prepared sentence felt too large for the room. She took the folded copy of the invoice from her purse and placed it on the rolling table, beside the untouched soup. Walter glanced at it. "I found your papers," she said. "People find all kinds of paper when they get old. I'm not here for that." "No? I'm here because you came to my mother's house when she was dying." His mouth tightened, then loosened again. The change was small. A younger Walter might have hidden it. This one had less control over his face. "I went to a lot of houses. Not like that." He looked at the invoice again. That was business. The word came out flat, almost bored. Evelyn had expected denial. She had expected him to say he did not remember, to send her away with a shrug and the lazy cruelty of a man who had outlived the evidence. She had not expected him to put the thing on the table so casually. Business. Her hand closed around the strap of her purse. "My mother was upstairs dying. I remember Margaret was ill. She was more than ill. People are often more than one thing." It was a slippery answer, and for one bright second, Evelyn saw the man Ruth had described. Not the frail body in the chair, but the habit underneath, sidestepping, softening, and turning harm into wording. "You were pressuring my father about the house," she said. Walter gave a faint, dry laugh. Thomas never needed much pressure to get himself in trouble. "That isn't an answer. It's the truest one you'll get." Evelyn stayed standing. She would not sit in the chair across from him. Sitting would make this a visit. "You wanted signatures. I wanted debts handled. You wanted the house." He looked up then. "I wanted what was owed." "My mother's house was not owed to you. Your father had obligations. My mother's name was on the deed. And Thomas was her husband. That didn't make it his to hand over." Walter's eyes narrowed, not with strength, but with old irritation waking up. "You came all this way to tell me things I already heard from your mother." That struck harder than Evelyn let show. She told you no. She told everybody no by then. She was dying. She was still sharp enough. For the first time, something like respect entered his voice. It was brief and grudging, gone almost as soon as it appeared. Evelyn leaned one hand on the end of the rolling table. The bowl of soup trembled slightly. "What did she say to you?" Walter's gaze moved to the window. Outside, a nurse pushed another resident along the sidewalk in a wheelchair. The resident wore a purple knit cap, though the afternoon was mild. Clara stood near the front entrance with her arms folded, watching the parking lot instead of the window. Walter sighed. "Your mother said the house was for you." Evelyn did not move. "She said it more than once," he added, as if saying it made it law. "It was law. Law costs money to defend. Your father didn't have money. Because of debts you were using against him. I didn't create Thomas's debts. No, you just arrived when my mother was too sick to fight you properly." Walter turned his head back to her, careful. The old warning would have frightened her at 36. At 66, it only made him look more tired. Evelyn said, "Or what?" His mouth opened, closed. Nothing came. That too was an answer. She took Margaret's folded page from her purse. Not the whole bundle. Just the page where her mother had written Walter's name and the line that had unsettled everything. "Thomas has failed me in ways I'm too tired to repair, but he is not the one I fear will take this from you." Evelyn did not hand it to him. She held it where he could see Margaret's handwriting. "Did you know she wrote this?" Walter's eyes moved over the page. His expression did not change enough. "She wrote a lot," he said. "She wrote that you were the one she feared. I expect dying people fear many things." The room seemed to tilt toward the sentence. Evelyn set the page down, slowly, before her anger could make her careless with it. "She used her last breath to warn me," she said. And because of you, because of what you were doing, I thought she meant my father." Walter did not answer. "I spent 30 years believing she wanted me to fight him. 30 years. That was between you and Thomas." "No." "Yes." His voice sharpened, and the old Walter came through again, thin but intact. "I did not make Thomas proud. I did not make Margaret quiet. I did not make you stubborn." The words landed clean. Too clean. Evelyn had come prepared for excuses. She had not come prepared for an ugly piece of truth inside one. Walter reached for the cup on the windowsill. His hand shook. He missed it once, then caught it with his fingertips. Evelyn watched him struggle and did not help. He drank, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and set the cup down. "I pushed," he said. The admission was so small that Evelyn almost missed it. "You what?" "I pushed. I wanted papers signed before things got messier. Thomas owed. Margaret was sick. You were going to come in with opinions and no understanding of the numbers. I was her daughter. And daughters think that settles accounts. It settled the house." "Yes," he said, and it did. The simple acknowledgement should have satisfied her. It did not. "Did you lie to her?" Walter's mouth twitched. "People call it lying when they don't like the terms. Did you lie to her?" I made things sound urgent. They weren't? They were urgent for me. There it was. Not a confession large enough to match 30 years. Not remorse, not apology. Just the small, mean shape of ordinary selfishness. Evelyn looked at the man in the chair, at his cardigan sleeve, his untouched soup, the peppermints on the sill. She had wanted him enormous because the damage had been enormous. But he was not enormous. He was only old. A man who had once known where pressure could be applied and had called it work. "You hurt her," Evelyn said. Walter looked out the window again. "I suppose I did." "You suppose? She won, didn't she?" Evelyn stared at him. "The house stayed with you." The sentence hit the deepest place and found no satisfaction there. Because yes, the house had stayed with her. So had everything else. Her father's silence. Her mother's unfinished warning. Clara's face in the attic. Hurt because Evelyn had hidden papers from her like Clara was some intruder. Margaret's bedroom kept too still. The table no one could move. The house standing all these years like proof and punishment. Walter looked at her, mistaking her quiet for defeat or perhaps not caring enough to know the difference. "You came wanting one thing to blame," he said. "Old people do that. Makes a life look cleaner." Evelyn folded Margaret's page and put it back in her purse. "I didn't come for advice." "No," he said. "You came for a villain." The word should have angered her. Instead, it opened a tired space in her. She had come for a villain. Maybe not only that, maybe not in words, but some part of her had wanted Walter to be large enough to hold all of it. If he had been cruel enough, greedy enough, unashamed enough, then Evelyn could leave this room with the old story repaired around a new center. Not Thomas, Walter. Same house, same fight, same locked rooms. She looked at the invoice on the tray table. "My father tried to speak to me after the funeral." Walter shrugged. Thomas was always better after the moment passed. "What did he want to tell me?" "I wouldn't know." "You knew enough then." "I knew what he owed." Evelyn waited. Walter rubbed one thumb over the arm of the chair. "He wanted to keep his pride. Margaret wanted to keep the house for you. I wanted my money. None of us were saints. No one asked you to be a saint." "No, but you wanted somebody to be a devil." The words hung between them, small and sour. Evelyn picked up the invoice. She had imagined this moment would give her something solid. Instead, it gave way under her foot. At the door, she turned back. "Did my mother ever say what she wanted me to do with the house?" Walter's expression shifted again, not softened exactly, but emptied of argument. "She said you needed somewhere to come back to." Evelyn's hand tightened on the doorknob. "Anything else?" He looked past her toward the muted television. "She said you'd fight like hell for it and forget to live in it." The sentence had no grace. It did not sound like Margaret. It sounded like Walter repeating something he had not understood and had not cared to remember kindly. But the meaning was there. Rough, incomplete, enough. Evelyn opened the door. Clara stood in the hall, no longer by the entrance. She straightened when she saw Evelyn. "You okay?" Evelyn almost said yes. The old answer rose easily. It had worn a path. Instead, she looked back once at Walter Briggs, sitting beside his cold soup with the baseball game flickering soundlessly across his face. "No," she said, but I'm finished here." Clara did not ask finished how. She only nodded and walked beside her to the elevator. They rode down with a woman in a green uniform carrying a basket of folded towels. The woman hummed under her breath. Clara watched the floor numbers change. Evelyn watched Clara's reflection in the elevator doors, the worried set of her mouth, the way she kept her hands loose at her sides as if trying not to reach for her mother too quickly. Outside, the afternoon light had gone pale. Clara unlocked the car, but Evelyn did not get in right away. "What did he say?" Clara asked. Evelyn looked across the parking lot. A maple tree near the curb had dropped leaves into a storm drain. Someone would have to clear it before rain. The thought came automatically practical and useless. He said Walter wanted money, Evelyn said. Your grandfather hid behind shame. My mother tried to protect me. None of it was as clean as I made it. Clara stood still. Evelyn took a breath. It scraped a little going in. And he said she wanted me to have somewhere to come back to. Clara's eyes changed. Not victory, not pity, something quieter. That sounds like Grandma, she said. Evelyn nodded. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The building doors slid open behind them, and a nurse helped an old man with a cane step carefully over the threshold. Evelyn looked at Clara's hand on the car keys. You can drive, she said. Clara's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she did not make a point of it. Okay. On the way home, Evelyn kept Margaret's folded page in her lap. She did not read it again. The words were already there. At the house, Clara pulled to the curb and left the engine running a moment too long. I can come in, Clara said. You don't have to. I know. Evelyn looked at the front porch. The railing leaned slightly where the bracket had pulled loose. Clara had mentioned that first. Evelyn had dismissed it first. So many things had followed that pattern. Not tonight, Evelyn said. Clara's face closed before she could stop it. Evelyn saw it this time. I mean, she said, and the correction felt clumsy in her mouth. Not because I don't want you there. Clara waited. Evelyn opened the car door, then looked back. Come tomorrow? For what? Evelyn stepped out, holding her purse against her side. Not for the realtor. Clara's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Then for what? Evelyn looked at the house, at the porch, the kitchen window, the upstairs room that had stayed closed for too long. I need to decide what this house is now, she said. Clara did not answer right away. Then she said, what time? The question was plain, practical. A daughter making room for a door she was not sure would stay open. Evelyn's hand rested on the car frame. 10, she said. Clara nodded. Evelyn shut the car door and walked up the path slowly. At the porch, she paused beside the loose railing and touched it once. Not to steady herself this time, but to feel how easily it moved under her hand. Behind her, Clara's car remained at the curb until Evelyn unlocked the front door and went inside. Chapter 6, A House with Lights On. Evelyn put 3 keys on the kitchen table before she let herself change her mind. One was hers, worn dull along the teeth from years of use. One was the spare she had kept in the drawer beside the stove under rubber bands and old twist ties, though she had never once given it to Clara. The third was new, bright enough to look almost rude against the scarred wood. She had gone to the hardware store herself that morning and stood at the counter, while a boy younger than Clara had cut it for her. Need more than one? He had asked. Evelyn had almost said no. Then she had looked at the blank keys hanging behind him, rows of small, unclaimed doors, and said, 2. Now the extra keys sat beside Margaret's letters, the pages stacked carefully and weighted with the dented thimble from the sewing box. Evelyn had opened the curtains over the sink. She had wiped the table twice, though it had not been dirty. She had replaced the burned-out bulb over the stove, then stood beneath it a moment, blinking in the stronger light. The kitchen looked too awake. For years, she had kept it neat in the way a person kept a waiting room neat. Everything in its proper drawer. Nothing out long enough to invite change. This morning, the letters were on the table, the sewing box was open on the counter, and a yellow legal pad lay beside the keys with a list written in Evelyn's hand. Porch railing, stair rail, kitchen ceiling, upstairs bathroom, Margaret's room. She had written the last item and then sat for several minutes with the pen still in her hand. At 10 exactly, Clara knocked. She still knocked. Evelyn looked at the back door, then at the keys. Come in, she called. The door opened slowly. Clara stepped into the kitchen wearing jeans, a navy sweater, and the careful expression of someone entering a room where the rules might have changed but had not yet been explained. Her eyes went first to Evelyn, then to the table, then to the keys. She did not take off her coat. Hi, she said. Hi. Clara looked toward the front of the house, then back at Evelyn. I wasn't sure if you meant 10-10 or 10 exactly. I meant 10, I figured. The small exchange almost made the morning ordinary, almost. Clara closed the door behind her. She stayed near it. Evelyn noticed the purse on her shoulder, the way one hand still held the strap, ready to leave if the conversation turned into another closed door. Evelyn touched the back of a chair. You can sit. Clara glanced at the table. Is this about the realtor? No. Clara's face tightened before she could hide it. Okay. No, Evelyn said again because the first time had sounded too sharp. Not like that. Clara came closer but did not sit. Her eyes moved over the letters. Did you read more? Yes. And? Evelyn had practiced an explanation while opening the curtains, while washing the mugs in the sink, while standing in line at the hardware store. Every version sounded too polished, too clean for what had happened. She did not want Clara to hear a speech. She wanted her to hear the part that mattered and to see the rest laid out on the table. She picked up Margaret's final page. Walter was the man she was afraid of, Evelyn said. Not your grandfather. Not in the way I thought. Clara's shoulders eased only a little. Grandpa still hid things, Evelyn continued. He let Walter come around. He let pride do what pride does. I don't know if I can make him less responsible than that. You don't have to. I know, Evelyn looked at the page. But I made him the whole story. It was easier that way. Clara was quiet. Evelyn put the page down. Your grandmother wanted me to have the house. That part was true. Clara's eyes flicked to the keys again. But not like this, Evelyn said. The sentence stayed between them without needing anything around it. Clara pulled out a chair and sat slowly. She kept her coat on. Evelyn sat across from her. For a moment, they looked like two women at a table full of paperwork, which they were. But the papers were not taxes now. They were not proof. They were pieces of someone who had failed to finish a warning and somehow left enough behind to undo it. I thought if I let anything change, Evelyn said, I was letting someone take it. Clara ran her thumb along the edge of her purse strap. Someone? Walter, your grandfather. Time. Evelyn looked toward the hallway. You sometimes. Clara's face tightened. Evelyn did not look away. That was wrong. Clara's mouth moved, but she said nothing. I know you weren't trying to take her from me, Evelyn said. Or the house. Clara looked down at her lap. I wasn't. I know. You kept acting like I was. I know that too. The admission was plain and ugly. Evelyn let it be plain. She did not try to dress it up. Clara took a breath. I don't hate this house. Evelyn nodded. I hated feeling like I had to be careful in it all the time. Clara looked around the kitchen, not accusingly now, but as if she were checking the room against a memory. Like everything here already belonged to someone else, even when I was a kid. Evelyn looked at the scratch near the corner of the table, the one Clara had made with scissors. She had once kept that mark as proof that a child could damage what mattered. Today it looked like proof that a child had once sat there trying to make something. I should have let you paint your room blue, Evelyn said. Clara looked up, startled. What? Your room when you were 15. Clara stared at her for a second, then gave a small laugh that almost broke. That is not where I thought this was going. It was terrible blue. It was not terrible. It was very terrible. It was bright. It was blinding. Clara's laugh came again, softer this time. Evelyn had not realized how long it had been since she had heard that sound in this kitchen without it being forced. Then Clara's eyes filled and the laugh left her. I didn't care about the color, she said. I know. Clara wiped quickly under one eye. I wanted something here that could be mine. Evelyn reached for the spare key and pushed it across the table. Clara stared at it. You don't have to ask anymore, Evelyn said. The words came out rougher than she intended. She tried again. This house was never supposed to make you feel like a guest. Clara did not touch the key. For one painful second, Evelyn thought she had waited too long, that the key looked too small now, too late, too easy after years of closed doors and corrected cabinets and rooms kept untouched. Clara looked at her. Mom, is this really what you want? Or are you just afraid to let it go? There it was. The question Evelyn had expected and dreaded. Clara did not ask it cruelly. That made it harder to answer badly. Evelyn looked at the kitchen window, at the clear square of morning light on the counter. She could have said she was sure. She could have said she had thought it through. She could have said all the things a mother said when she wanted her daughter to stop worrying. Instead, she looked back at Clara. I'm afraid either way. Clara's face changed. I'm afraid to let it go, Evelyn said. I'm afraid to keep it. I'm afraid I made it into something your grandmother never asked for. But yesterday, I stood on the porch and touched the railing, and it moved under my hand. And I thought about you telling me that weeks ago. I thought about how many things you told me that I called interference because it was easier than saying you were right. Clara's fingers loosened on her purse strap. Evelyn touched the legal pad. I don't want to sell because I'm scared. And I don't want to keep it because I'm scared. I want to make it a house again. Clara looked at the list. Porch railing, stair rail, kitchen ceiling, upstairs bathroom, Margaret's room. You made a list, she said. I make lists. Yes, you do. This one is not just mine. Clara looked at the key again. Evelyn waited. She had forced enough in this house. For once, she would not push. Finally, Clara picked up the key. She held it in her palm, turning it once with her thumb. Then she put it in her coat pocket. Not on the table, not back toward Evelyn. In her pocket. Evelyn's hands folded together in her lap. It was a small thing, a key disappearing into fabric. It felt larger than any promise she could have asked for. Clara looked at the legal pad again. The porch railing should be first. I know. And the stair rail. I know. And the upstairs bathroom, because that tile by the tub is going to kill you. It is one loose tile. It is 3 loose tiles and 1 bad attitude. Evelyn nearly smiled. The tile has an attitude? It learned from you. This time Evelyn did smile, and Clara saw it. The room held it carefully. After a moment, Evelyn stood. There's something else. Clara's smile faded, but she rose too. Evelyn took the second new key from the table. This one is for you to keep at your house, or give to Ben, or whichever of you is less likely to lose it. Ben loses everything. Then not Ben. Clara took the second key, but her brow furrowed. Mom, I'm not finished. Evelyn started toward the stairs. Clara followed, close, but not crowding. At the bottom step, Evelyn paused and looked at the railing. The bracket had pulled farther from the wall than she remembered. She touched it once, then continued up. Margaret's room waited at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. Evelyn had left it that way on purpose. Clara noticed. Her steps slowed. Evelyn pushed the door open. Morning light lay across the bedspread, making visible what the dimness had hidden for years. Dust at the baseboard, a faded rectangle on the wall where a picture had once hung. The uneven color of curtains washed too many times and then left too long. The room did not look sacred. It looked unused. Evelyn stepped aside. I don't want to keep it like this. Clara looked at her. I don't mean empty it all out today, Evelyn said. I don't mean pretend she wasn't here. I know. I mean, Evelyn stopped. The right words did not come. She tried the plain ones. Nobody lives in a room that stays like this. Clara's eyes moved over the bed, the dresser, the sewing box still open from the day before. What do you want it to be? I don't know yet. That answer would have humiliated her once. Now it seemed almost decent. Clara stepped farther into the room. It gets good light in the afternoon? Yes, it could be a reading room. Clara touched the back of the chair near the window, then glanced at Evelyn before moving it an inch. Evelyn said nothing. Clara moved it another inch. Or a room for the kids when they come over, not a playroom exactly. Just somewhere they can make a mess without you hovering. I do not hover. Clara gave her a look. I may observe closely. That is hovering with better posture. Evelyn looked at the bed. She imagined the spread folded away, the mattress removed, a small table near the window, Clara's children leaving books open on the chair, crayons in a cup, fingerprints on the glass. The thought hurt. Then it warmed in the same place. Your grandmother would hate crayons on the windowsill, Evelyn said. Would she? Evelyn thought of Margaret handing Clara a thimble and calling it armor. She thought of the old meatloaf recipe, the grocery lists, the sentence about a door that opened. No, she said, probably not. Clara turned from the window. We can keep the sewing box here. Yes. And her picture. Yes. And maybe paint. Evelyn looked at the faded wallpaper. What color? Clara did not smile, but Evelyn saw the effort. Not blinding blue. That would be wise. Maybe a soft blue. Evelyn considered it. Maybe. The word was small. It was enough. They worked for an hour without calling it work. Clara took the old sheets from the linen closet and shook them out. Evelyn sorted through the dresser drawers, keeping handkerchiefs, letters, a small Bible with pressed leaves inside. They did not throw much away. That was not the point. The point was that Clara opened drawers now. The point was that Evelyn let her. Near noon, Clara's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. Ben. Answer it. Clara hesitated. Are you sure? Evelyn gave her a dry look. I know phones work in this house. Clara smiled and stepped into the hallway. Evelyn heard her voice, low and warmer than it had been that morning. Hey, yeah, I'm still at Mom's. No, it's okay. It's good, actually. A pause. Then Clara laughed softly. No, don't bring lunch. Bring the kids later. Maybe around 5. Mom says the railing is trying to kill her, and apparently we're making a list. Evelyn opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. From the hallway, Clara added, Yes, dinner, nothing fancy. She came back a minute later, phone in hand. I should have asked before inviting them. You did ask. I told him. You told him what I wanted you to tell him? Clara looked at her carefully, as if testing whether the sentence had another edge. It did not. Downstairs, they returned to the kitchen. The letters were still on the table, but they no longer filled it. Evelyn moved them to the sideboard, placing Margaret's final page on top, under the thimble. Not hidden, not spread like evidence. Kept. Clara opened the refrigerator. You have eggs, half a jar of pickles, and something that used to be celery. It is still celery. It has given up. I was not expecting company. You invited company. I invited you. Clara glanced over the refrigerator door. And I come with attachments. Evelyn thought of saying something practical about not having enough food. Instead, she opened the pantry and took out a bag of potatoes. We can make soup, she said. For dinner? People eat soup for dinner. People with bread. I have bread in the freezer. Of course you do. They moved around each other carefully at first. Clara washed potatoes, Evelyn peeled carrots. Clara found the good pot without asking, then stopped herself with one hand on the cabinet handle. Evelyn noticed. That one, she said. Clara pulled the pot out. The kitchen filled slowly with ordinary noise. Water running, a knife against the cutting board. The soft thud of potatoes dropped into the pot. Evelyn corrected Clara once about the thickness of the carrots, then caught herself and said, "Actually, that's fine." Clara looked at the carrots. They are completely uneven. "Yes, you're allowing that?" "I'm practicing." Clara laughed. By 5:30, the kitchen smelled of soup, warm bread, and the faint lemon cleaner Evelyn had used on the table that morning. Ben arrived with the children and a grocery bag he claimed was not lunch, just supporting materials. Evelyn accepted the bag without commenting on the fact that it contained a salad, a pie, and a carton of vanilla ice cream. Clara's son Noah came in first, all elbows in sneakers, holding a school drawing rolled in one hand. His little sister Emma followed more slowly, carrying a stuffed rabbit by one ear. Evelyn braced herself for noise. Then Emma looked up at her and said, "Mom said we can see the room with the good window." Clara closed her eyes briefly on Emma. Evelyn looked at the child, then at Clara. "The room with the good window," Evelyn said, "is upstairs." Emma's face brightened. "Can I see?" Evelyn took a breath. "Yes, after dinner." Noah dropped his drawing on the table, too close to Margaret's old scratch. Evelyn almost moved it. She did not. Dinner was not graceful. The soup needed more salt. Noah spilled water and then froze, waiting to be scolded. Evelyn handed him a towel. Emma disliked carrots unless they were small enough not to notice, and Clara gave Evelyn a look over the child's head when Evelyn quietly cut them smaller. The table filled in ways it had not filled for years. Bowls, spoons, breadcrumbs. A folded napkin under the wobbling leg of Emma's chair. Clara's key lying beside her purse on the side counter because she had taken it out to show Ben and had not put it away again. Evelyn saw it there more than once. Each time it remained. After dinner, Clara stood to clear plates. "Leave them," Evelyn said. Clara looked at her. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm feeling full of uneven carrots." Ben coughed into his napkin. Noah laughed too loudly. Emma asked what was funny, and no one explained it well. Evelyn leaned back in Margaret's old chair and looked across the table. Clara was still standing with two bowls in her hands. There was a smear of soup near her sleeve. A strand of hair had fallen loose from behind her ear. She looked tired. She looked wary in places still. But she did not look like a visitor waiting for permission to breathe. "Sit, Evelyn said. Clara sat. The kitchen light glowed over the table. The new bulb was too bright, but Evelyn decided not to mind. Outside the windows, evening had settled over Linden Street. Inside, Emma's rabbit lay on the floor near the stove. Noah's drawing had unrolled beside the bread plate, and Ben was telling a story about buying the wrong size furnace filter that somehow made Clara laugh with her whole face. Evelyn looked at the table where the realtor's hand had rested days earlier, where Margaret had written lists, where Evelyn had guarded papers, where Clara had once made a scratch trying to cut a birthday card. The wood held all of it. No one asked it to choose. Later, when Clara reached for the key on the counter before leaving, Evelyn watched her. Clara paused with it in her hand. "I'll come by Saturday. We can start with the railing." Evelyn nodded. "Bring the kids if you want." "They'll make a mess." "I expect they will." Clara studied her, and this time the smile came without caution. "We'll bring paint samples too. Not blinding blue. No promises." Evelyn opened the back door for them. For years, she had locked it as soon as Clara stepped out, sometimes before Clara's car had pulled away. Tonight, she stood in the doorway while Ben buckled Emma into the car seat, and Noah shouted something about the good window from the back seat. Clara turned at the porch steps. "Mom?" "Yes?" Clara lifted the key once, not like proof, not like a question. "Tomorrow?" Evelyn looked back into the kitchen. The light was still on. The table was still cluttered. The dishes waited in the sink. Margaret's letters rested on the sideboard under the dented thimble, no longer hidden, no longer holding the room hostage. "Tomorrow," Evelyn said. Clara smiled and went down the steps. Evelyn stayed by the open door until the car pulled away. Then she returned to the kitchen, stood beside the table, and began stacking bowls. She did not lock the door until after the dishes were done.